Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is the story of Ethan, a man who dreamed of writing but never began every day. He carried ideas in his mind like unopened letters, waiting for the right moment. But when the moment came, he froze the screen. Stayed blank. The pen stayed still. He told himself he was too busy, too tired, not ready. Then one morning, with a simple challenge from a colleague, Ethan discovered a way forward. 3 messy pages at sunrise. What began as scribbles slowly became something bigger, the doorway to his creativity and to a life he never expected. Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the blinking cursor on his laptop. It was 10:47 p.m. The day had been long, and his head was buzzing with thoughts, work emails, bills to pay, and that nagging reminder that he hadn't called his mom back. But underneath it all was something louder, the quiet ache of wanting to write for years. Ethan had told himself he would start. He had notebooks with empty pages, pens that dried out before they were ever used, and dozens of computer folders titled things like New Story Draft or Ideas 2022. None of them had more than a sentence every time he tried. The same thing happened. He opened a blank page and froze. The words in his mind felt heavy and jumbled. He thought, what if it's bad? What if it doesn't make sense? What if I have nothing to say at all? The fear of writing badly always beat the desire to write it also. Instead, Ethan scrolled on his phone, watched a video, and told himself, tomorrow I'll start. But tomorrow always turned into another tomorrow. At work, Ethan was a reliable graphic designer. He made clean, neat designs for clients and delivered projects on time. His colleagues liked him. His boss trusted him, but inside, Ethan felt restless. It wasn't that he hated his job. He just knew he wanted something more. He wanted to write stories, essays, maybe even a book one day. But the gap between dreaming and doing felt impossible to cross. Some nights, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying sentences in his head, snippets of conversations, lines of imaginary dialogue. By morning, they were gone, like mist burned away by the sun. And every day, the guilt grew heavier. He thought, real writers write. If I can't even begin, maybe I'm not meant to be one. He closed his laptop, sighing. The blank page had beaten him again. That was Ethan's life for months, maybe years, an endless cycle of desire and defeat, until one ordinary Tuesday at work, when a conversation with a colleague changed everything. It was a Tuesday morning, gray and drizzly. Ethan sat at his desk, sipping lukewarm coffee and dragging icons around on his computer screen. He had a client deadline, but his mind was far away across the office. His colleague, Maya, leaned over her cubicle wall. You look like you're in another world, she said with a grin. Ethan chuckled weakly. Maybe I'm just tired. Maya tilted her head. Or maybe you're stuck. The word hit a little too close. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Stuck? She shrugged. Yeah, you've got that look, like you've got 100 ideas in your head, but none of them will come out. Ethan blinked. That's weirdly accurate. Not weird at all, Maya said. Happens to me too. I used to feel jammed up all the time until I started doing morning pages. Morning what? Ethan asked. Morning pages, Maya repeated. It's this thing I read about every morning. First thing, you write 3 pages. Doesn't matter what it is. No editing, no overthinking, just whatever's in your head. Ethan frowned. Like a diary? Not exactly. It's not for anyone else to read. It's just a brain dump. Get all the noise out, clear the cobwebs, and move on. She smiled. It's like giving your brain a morning shower. Ethan laughed. 3 pages of nonsense. Every morning? That sounds pointless. Maya leaned on the cubicle wall, lowering her voice. That's what I thought too, but after a week, I noticed I was calmer, less cluttered in my head, and sometimes little ideas started sneaking in. It's not about writing something brilliant, it's about showing up. Ethan stirred his coffee, thinking the idea seemed simple, too simple. He had tried complicated plans before, outlining novels, setting word count goals, even buying fancy software. None of it worked. But 3 messy pages? He wasn't sure if that was worth the effort. Maya seemed to read his doubt. Look, you don't have to believe me. Just try it 1 week, 3 pages a day. Don't judge it. Don't reread it. Just do it. Worst case, you waste a few sheets of paper. Best case, she smiled, you surprise yourself. Ethan gave a half smile. And you really do this every day? Every day, Maya said proudly. Even weekends, my pen knows me better than anyone now. He chuckled, but something about her words stuck in his mind. That night, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling again. He thought of the blank page, of all the unfinished folders on his computer, and then he thought of Maya, scribbling away in her notebook, not caring if it made sense or not. Maybe, he thought, it was worth a try. The next morning, Ethan's alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m. He usually hit snooze at least twice, but today he sat up right away. His body felt heavy, his eyelids even heavier. But he remembered Maya's words. 1 week, just try it. He shuffled into the kitchen, made a quick cup of instant coffee, and sat down at his small table with a blank notebook. The pages were crisp and white, almost intimidating. He stared at the page, then at the pen, then back at the page. His mind was empty, or maybe too full. Either way, the words refused to come. Finally, he sighed and wrote, I don't know what to write. This feels stupid. I should be in bed. Why am I doing this? He tapped the pen against the table. The silence in the apartment felt loud, so he kept writing. The coffee tastes weird. My back hurts from sleeping funny. I can hear the neighbor's dog barking again. I wonder if anyone else is awake right now. Probably. People with actual lives. I don't know if this counts. Do I just keep going? The sentences tumbled out, awkward and rambling. None of it felt meaningful. But after a few minutes, his hand moved faster. Thoughts popped into his head, and instead of rejecting them, he scribbled them down. By the end of the 3rd page, he dropped the pen with relief. Well, he muttered, that was garbage. He closed the notebook, drank the last sip of his lukewarm coffee, and got ready for work the next morning. He tried again. This time, his hand hurt halfway through page 2. How do people do this every day? He groaned, shaking out his fingers. But he kept scribbling. He complained about traffic, about how much he hated making small talk at the office, about how he wished he had more energy. When he finished, he sighed again. Still nonsense. On the 3rd morning, he almost didn't bother. He lay in bed, staring at the alarm clock. What's the point? He muttered, but something inside pushed him up. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the tiny voice that whispered, what if this works? That morning, he wrote about a dream he had, something about getting lost in a train station. The details blurred, but writing it down felt oddly satisfying. He didn't know why. By the end of the week, Ethan had a small stack of messy pages, complaints, random thoughts, unfinished sentences. He flipped through them once and winced. It looked like the notebook of someone rambling to himself, but Maya asked him over lunch, "So, did you try it?" Ethan smirked. "Yeah, it's mostly gibberish." She nodded. "That's fine. It's supposed to be gibberish." "I don't know," Ethan said. "It feels pointless." Maya leaned closer. "Did you notice anything different?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Well, I guess I feel a little lighter afterward, like I've already complained to someone before the day even starts." Maya grinned. "Exactly. That's the point. Keep going." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And you're saying this will magically make me creative?" "Not magic," Maya said. "Just space. Sometimes ideas need breathing room." Ethan rolled his eyes playfully, but that night he set his alarm again. By the second week, Ethan no longer hesitated as much. He still groaned when the alarm went off, still shuffled to the kitchen half asleep, but something about the routine felt grounding. Notebook was no longer pristine. Its first pages were bent and messy, filled with rushed handwriting, scribbles, and even the occasional doodle in the margins. Ethan still thought most of it was nonsense, but he noticed something strange. His mornings felt less heavy. One Tuesday, after closing his notebook, he realized he wasn't dragging his feet quite as much. His mind felt clearer, almost like he had already untangled some of the day's knots. Before the world even started at work, his boss gave him a tricky design brief. Normally, Ethan would procrastinate, open a blank Photoshop file, and stare at it until panic set in. But that morning, without overthinking, he sketched a few ideas on scrap paper. They weren't perfect, but they got the ball rolling. He paused, surprised. Where did that come from? Later, while waiting for his train home, he pulled out a notebook, not his morning pages one, just a small sketch pad, and began drawing, not for work, just doodling for himself. He hadn't done that in months. The little shifts kept coming. One morning, he found himself writing not just complaints, but questions. What if I took a walk after work instead of scrolling my phone? Why do I always say, I don't have time, when I waste so much of it online? What would happen if I just wrote a silly short story, just for me? Ethan stared at the questions. He didn't have answers, but writing them felt powerful. That weekend, instead of sleeping in, he sat at a cafe with his notebook. The hum of conversations, the smell of coffee, the sound of cups clinking, it all felt alive. He filled 3 pages before he even noticed the time. For the first time in years, he felt like he was having a conversation with himself. One evening, while meeting Maya for coffee, he admitted, "You were right, this whole morning pages thing. I don't know what's happening, but I feel less stuck." Maya grinned. "Told you, it's like unclogging a pipe. Once the junk flows out, water starts running again." Ethan chuckled. "That's a weird image, but I get it. You're not writing for the world." Maya reminded him, "You're writing to make space, and guess what? Space is where creativity sneaks in." Ethan nodded, slowly letting the words sink in. He didn't feel like a real writer yet, but for the first time in years, the thought didn't scare him. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of morning Ethan usually dreaded. Gray skies, a steady drizzle, and the faint sound of cars hissing on wet pavement outside his window. He sat at the table with his coffee and notebook. Still yawning, he expected another ramble about being tired or complaining about the rain, but something different happened. Without thinking, his pen began to write. Once there was a boy who collected raindrops in jars. Everyone laughed at him, but he believed each drop carried a secret. Ethan froze. He stared at the sentence. What was that? He whispered to himself. He wasn't planning to write a story. He didn't even mean to. But his hand kept moving. Soon he had a full page about a boy who bottled raindrops and discovered they contained voices, memories, and songs. When he looked up, his coffee was cold. He had filled 4 pages. Ethan leaned back in his chair, stunned. It wasn't a masterpiece, but it was a story, something he hadn't been able to start in years. The next day, he tried again. The writing was clumsy, but it didn't matter. Sometimes he wrote half a page of nonsense before stumbling into a scene, a character, or a memory. One morning, he wrote about his grandfather teaching him how to fly a kite. The memory was so vivid, so warm, that Ethan caught himself smiling at the page. Another day, he ranted about work and in the middle of it sketched out a funny comic idea about office printers being secretly alive. He showed it to Maya later, and she burst out laughing. "See?" she said. "Your creativity's waking up." Ethan wasn't sure whether to feel proud or embarrassed, but he couldn't deny it. Something inside him had shifted. Real breakthrough came 2 weeks later. His boss announced a new project. A big client wanted a fresh branding campaign. Ethan's team gathered in the conference room, tossing out half-hearted ideas. Normally, Ethan would have stayed quiet, doodling in his notebook, but this time, words slipped out of his mouth before he could stop them. What if we design it like a story? Not just a logo, but a journey, like the brand itself is a character. The room went silent. Ethan's face turned red. He was ready for someone to dismiss it, but his boss leaned forward. "That's actually brilliant. Let's build on that." The team jumped in, brainstorming around his idea. By the end of the meeting, his suggestion had become the foundation of the campaign. Ethan walked out of the room in disbelief. Did that really come from me? He thought about his morning pages, about how they made his thoughts flow instead of bottling them up. Maybe Maya was right. It wasn't magic, but it was space. And in that space, ideas had room to breathe. That night, he opened his notebook again, not because it was morning, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The words came easily. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt alive at the page. By now, Ethan's mornings felt different. He still grumbled at his alarm, still shuffled half asleep to the table. But once his pen touched paper, something unlocked. It was becoming a quiet ritual, messy, imperfect, but strangely comforting. One Wednesday afternoon, during a long team meeting, Ethan noticed his coworkers looking drained. The client's project was dragging on, and creativity felt like it had hit a wall almost. Without thinking, Ethan said, "Hey, you know what helps me when I feel stuck?" Something called morning pages. Several heads turned. "Morning what?" asked Jenna, the copywriter. "It's just writing 3 pages first thing in the morning," Ethan explained. "No rules, no editing, you just dump whatever's in your head. Half the time, it's junk, but sometimes you stumble on an idea you didn't know you had." People chuckled. "Sounds like journaling for zombies." Someone joked. Ethan smiled. "Yeah, basically, but it works." To his surprise, his boss leaned forward. "Interesting, you've been sharper lately." Ethan, more ideas and meetings. Maybe this is why. Ethan felt a flush of pride. He hadn't noticed anyone else noticing. The next day, Jenna showed up at his desk holding a notebook. "Okay," she said. "I tried your zombie journaling thing, and you know what? It actually helped me fix a headline I was stuck on." Ethan laughed. "See? Told you." Over the next week, a few more coworkers tried it out. Some did it in the morning, some at lunch, some before bed. They teased each other about who could scribble the messiest nonsense one Friday. His boss even started the team meeting differently. "Before we brainstorm, let's do 2 minutes of free writing anything, no rules." At first, people rolled their eyes, but by the end, the room felt lighter. Ideas flowed faster. Ethan realized something important at first. Morning pages felt like a private rescue rope, something just for him, something that pulled him out of a rut. But now it was bigger. His little daily scribbles were sparking something in others. One evening, while walking home, he thought back to the very first time Maya had mentioned morning pages. He had almost laughed it off. 3 pages of nonsense. What's the point? Now, the point was clear. It wasn't about the words on the page. It was about showing up, clearing space, letting thoughts move instead of tangle. And when you did that, when you created space for yourself, you sometimes ended up creating space for others too. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind Ethan used to waste scrolling on his phone. Now, his mornings began with the soft scratch of pen on paper. Ethan sat at his desk, a steaming mug of coffee beside him, and opened his notebook. The first few lines were the usual jumble complaints about the weather, a reminder to buy laundry detergent, a silly doodle in the corner. But then, without forcing it, the words shifted into something deeper. "I'm not afraid of the blank page anymore." He stopped writing for a moment, staring at this sentence. It was true. Months ago, he would freeze at the sight of an empty screen, waiting for the perfect idea that never came. Now, he simply began, messy, clumsy, imperfect. And in beginning, he always found something at work. The change was even clearer. His ideas came faster, and he spoke with more confidence in meetings. The campaign he had helped shape turned out to be a success, and his boss praised his creativity in front of the whole team. But the part that surprised him most wasn't the recognition. It was watching others catch the spark. Jenna now carried her notebook everywhere, scribbling during lunch breaks. His boss had started calling the teams warm-up, writing the 2-minute storm. Even Maya, the colleague who first told him about morning pages, confessed that she had fallen out of the habit, but seeing Ethan stick with it had inspired her to start again. One small habit, he realized, had rippled outward in ways he could never have predicted. That night, Ethan sat on his balcony, notebook in his lap. The city lights twinkled below. He thought about how it all began, with hesitation, with doubt, with the belief that he wasn't creative enough to even try. And yet, here he was, not a famous author, not someone with all the answers, but someone who had learned to take the first step. Again and again, he wrote one final line before closing his notebook. Creativity doesn't come from waiting for inspiration. It comes from showing up. Ethan's story is a reminder that change doesn't start with grand gestures. It starts with something small. 3 messy pages, 5 quiet minutes, one tiny step. When you give yourself permission to begin, even clumsily, you open the door for growth, for creativity, for transformation. So, if you're waiting for the perfect moment to start, don't. Grab a notebook, a pen, and a few minutes of your morning. Write badly, write nonsense, write anything at all, because sometimes The smallest daily habit can unlock the biggest parts of who you are. 1 step at a time, 1 page at a time. That's how the story begins.